Hello, welcome to the Dragon Plus livestream. Welcome to 2019 here from Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. So welcome back, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you. How did it get to be 2019?
I have no idea. I didn't know how each month gets to be the next month, and then by the time the calendar rolls over completely, it's always a surprise. For folks tuning in, Dragon Plus livestream, this is where we talk extensively about content heading into each issue of the Dragon Plus, the free app available on iOS, Android, and at dragonmag.com. Some of that content includes Unearthed Arcana, and so we've had Mr. Crawford come on every other week in the last few months to talk through rules and things of that nature. So, and again, for folks who might not be aware of Mr. Crawford, the lead rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons, the lead designer of the Player's Handbook, and the game's managing editor.
I'm not sure I do enough.
We can add some more in here. and co-host of the Dragon Plus live stream.
Yes.
And also Dungeon Master coming up in San Antonio, Texas, correct?
That's right. So for any of you who didn't see, I was the Dungeon Master for Acquisitions Incorporated at PAX Unplugged. It was a ton of fun. And we're going to have our second episode next week at PAX South, which is in San Antonio, Texas. If you're going to be at the convention, please come and watch the show live. If you can't be there, then you, of course, can watch the show online. I promise it's going to be a bunch of more wackiness. And I'm looking forward to being surprised by what the players decide to do as I present the insanity that is ahead of them. Which will start, a slight spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the last episode, it's going to start with a whole ring of wood chippers swooping in at Jim Dark Magic. So we'll see if Jim survives the wood chippers in the first 5 minutes of the session.
That'd be an interesting Acquisitions Inc., just a TPK of the sorry, dice fell where they may. So PAX South will be January 18th through the 20th, San Antonio, Texas. Jeremy's Acquisitions Inc. live game will be on Saturday, January 19th. At 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific, 8 to 11 p.m. Central on the PAX South website. That will be streamed, of course, on the PAX Twitch channel, and we'll also be hosting that on the D&D Twitch channel as well. So we're very much looking forward to seeing you in the Dungeon Master seat again.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. As I said, it was a lot of fun. They are amazing players to DM for, and it was also fun to get to DM in Ravnica a bit.
Well, the small mammal coward in me asks, how did you handle DMing in front of a large audience that way? Was that terrifying, manageable?
It was terrifying. What I did before going on stage was just get myself into the mindset that this is just like any other D&D game. There will just happen to be thousands of people watching it.
And so you had me until that clause.
And so I just kept focusing on, I love DMing, just keep my players in the story, having fun, and don't focus too much on the crowd out there. Just make sure my players have a great time, and then I had faith that if my players have a great time, then the people watching will have a great time. But that said, I was freaked out before I went up on stage. I texted Chris Perkins ahead of time. For those of you who watch the show, you know that I said up front that I only agreed to take on the mantle of Acquisitions Incorporated DM if my friend Chris Perkins approved of me taking it, because Chris and I have been working together for over 10 years.
Wow.
He was my DM for the first of those 5 years, and now I'm his DM. So basically, Chris's DM is now the DM of Acquisitions Incorporated. But I texted Chris before going up on stage that day, and he gave me great advice, which was just focus on the world, focus on weaving together this scenario for the people, and everything will go great. And that's what I needed to hear. That Chris believed in me.
Yeah. And it could have gone the other way. It could have tricked you like, oh shit, I forgot to give you the talisman, the lucky talisman. But if you don't have this in your pocket, it will go south.
But so Chris actually knew exactly the right thing to say to me. And I'm bringing this up actually as a piece of advice to all of you out there who are DMing. I am happiest as a dungeon master when I am focusing my mind not on the rules, not on the logistics of managing, 4 to 6 players at my table, but when I'm focused on this fantasy world that we're going on a trip to together. And whenever I'm in that mindset, and I also start to really channel the characters who are going to appear in my adventure, it's great. That's a sweet spot for me as a DM, where basically I am there. I'm imagining myself being there. And then I'm, as a DM, almost serving as a tour guide for my players, where it's basically, here's what I'm seeing in this fantasy world you're now visiting. And now, here's one of the characters you meet from there, and I will let them speak for a while. I found many years ago when I did a lot of acting in high school and college, that as soon as you also fall into a character, I find a lot of my nervousness fades away, because in a way it's way easier when you're being somebody other than yourself.
Well, I can't be nervous because I'm not me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm this NPC.
Yes, yeah. So if things go weird, it's the NPC who did it, not me.
So again, welcome everyone for 2019. We greatly appreciate you spending an hour of your day tuning into our live stream. Oh, and because I always forget to thank him at the end, thanks to Pelham Green for, as always, running the live stream console as well. So he gets to be off camera at the moment, but we've got the zoom in camera
and laugh at us. So that's what those of you watching don't see, is Pelham laughing at us.
For today's episode, what we wanted to do, we've got a lot to talk about. As always, we get through only some of it. We did talk through a bit of the new errata documents that came out at the end of 2018. We've got the basic rules we wanted to touch upon. We also do have a new Unearthed Arcana for Sidekicks, which came out right at the end of the year, which was super fun to see. And if you do have questions, we do love to collect your questions. I've got a big list of questions from last time. If you have more, please do send them in. Our moderators, Obo Crazy, is right there collecting them for us right now. Just please preface them with a question at the beginning. And if we don't get them to them this live stream, we are collecting them, and we do put them into a big bin. We need one of those like roller bins, and then you could reach in and pull out a question, and maybe we'll start doing things that way. Before we begin, just a quick word for your holidays. How were they? Were there special games played? Any gifts given or received of a gaming nature, out of curiosity?
So I was off for 2 weeks. The first week was a vortex of family down in California. It was great to see everybody, but I counted it up, and I think in the end I saw about 30 relatives and family friends. So it was kind of tiring. And then I had grand plans to come home and have this vacation at home.
Right.
Well, I came home with the flu. So I had a fever for 5 days straight. Basically was laying on the sofa. I tried to make the best of it. Finished playing the new Spider-Man game on PS4. Read some graphic novels. Caught up on The Man in the High Castle. Let's see, you asked about gaming presents. One of the presents I got was Pokemon Let's Go on the Switch, which I played a bit on the plane. Super cute game. I've also played some more of Dragon Quest XI, which last night kind of broke my brain there's essentially like a Mardi Gras parade in it at one point, but you can still fight monsters while you're in a Mardi Gras outfit. You have to see it to believe it. It was stunning.
So your game in life was Pandemic, if you've got the flu.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I'm sorry,
that's right.
Sorry to hear that.
But I stayed indoors and made sure I didn't spread the flu to all of Seattle.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Really quickly, a couple bits of housekeeping. We do have D&D news coming on afterwards at 3 p.m. Pacific, followed by Dice Camera Action at 4. Mike Merle's Happy Fun Hour is off for a bit of time. Just work functions being what they are, we're looking to get Mike back onto the schedule probably around March, right around GaryCon or shortly thereafter, just as a timeline. So why don't we get to it? We wanted to, you mentioned touching briefly on the basic rules and the errata for a bit before we dive into Sidekicks. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, real quick, just in case anyone didn't see, before the holiday break, we released errata documents for the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. You can download those for free on our website, and all of the changes in those errata documents appear in the core book gift sets that were released at the end of last year. Sorry, the problem of having a flu is I will occasionally cough. We also released a new version of the basic rules that incorporate all of the latest errata. So if you download the basic rules on our website, you are getting the freshest version of those rules.
I was going to.
And the other advantage of the new version of the basic rules is we have now finally combined what was formerly 2 different PDFs, one for players and one for Dungeon Masters, into a single document. So you can now download for free in one place all of the basic rules of Dungeons and Dragons. And it includes 4 simple versions of classes, the wizard, the rogue, the cleric, and the fighter. It includes some races, spells, monsters, magic items, everything you need to get a starting D&D game up and running. Basic rules are a fantastic thing to point people to if you have new people joining your D&D group. If you have somebody joining who's always wanted to play D&D but feels daunted by getting a player's handbook or a starter set, let them know they can download those rules for free on our website and get started playing.
So really quickly, if you are looking for the basic rules, the website, dnd.wizards.com. If you navigate over to products, and then on the far right, it's under resources. You can just find a link to the basic rules right there. If you go to the individual product pages for the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, or Dungeon Master's Guide, you can download the errata documents for those books individually there as well. So.
But again, if you have the latest printings of the core books, you don't need those errata documents because all of the changes in those documents appears in those most recent printings, in those gift sets, and the changes will appear in all future printings of the core books. And if you're a D&D Beyond subscriber, all of the changes also now appear on D&D Beyond. And you're looking, you have a question.
I do. There's a question coming in from Lost Laboratory of Kowalish about giving the main villain some motivation and dynamism. I'll answer that one separately and individually off the stream. I like the question, so always looking for improvements that we can make to that adventure. I'll work in an answer, maybe in Dragon Plus. Much appreciated. Again, Lost Laboratory of Kowalish available on the DM's Guild. All Wizards of the Coast proceeds are going to Extra Life. And I believe the print-on-demand version of Lost Lab is available now. So that was, again, on the Dragon Plus livestream. Jeremy was kindly helping me hammer away at one of the magic items, the powered armor that we worked on diligently. So we kind of spoke briefly about maybe the adventure for this year's Extra Life. We might start a little bit earlier, workshop some ideas, kind of go into things a little bit more in depth along the way. You can see a little bit of how an adventure kind of comes together in an internal way here at Wizards of the Coast, thanks to Jeremy. So we'll plan on that for some future episodes.
Yeah, I would love to next time not only do a magic item like we did, but we could show some monsters or NPCs being created. We could maybe deal with some traps, just so that we can basically do some of the work that we do here at Wizards of the Coast in front of you on camera, so you get to see how the soup gets made.
A lot of it involves drinking coffee, so you can watch us drinking coffee right
yes,
now.
I drink way too much coffee.
Same as well. Before we move on to the sidekicks or any of your questions, was there anything regarding the specifics about the errata or basic rules that you wanted to cover? We did kind of go through them bit by bit last time, but I didn't know.
That was all. I just wanted to make sure for many of us, whenever there is a holiday break, 1 week can feel like a month, and I wanted to make sure if any of you are joining us for the first time in a few months that you were aware that the errata dropped as well as the new version of the basic rules.
All right, well, why don't we take it over to the sidekicks. This, again, is the most recent Unearthed Arcana article. This was a straightforward way to play and level up a sidekick, which always reminds me of an old Onion article where it was two friends, each one thinks the other one is the sidekick.
Right.
The relationship. But this is an actual sidekick for your character. So how did this come together? What were some of the thoughts that went into this? And let's look at some of the mechanics. And if you have questions about Unearthed Arcana, please, again, let us know in the comments.
So Unearthed Arcana is often a place for us to experiment with something that might appear in a future book. Sometimes it's just something we're curious about and we want to find out what you all think about it. This is actually a collection of ideas we've been toying around with for actually several future books. And we've known for a while that there was a desire for more guidance on having a companion, an NPC companion, with you in a group. For those of you who don't know, and this gets touched on briefly in the Sidekick article, the Dungeon Master's Guide actually already provides rules on having NPC companions. But those rules assume either that you're using a monster stat block as is, or that you're creating an NPC as a full-fledged, just as you would make a full-fledged player character, or it assumes you're taking a monster stat block, adding character levels to it, but then in the process, to figure out that modified monster's proficiency bonus, you're going to have to keep recalculating that monster's challenge rating, which, especially without the digital tools we have here, can sometimes be a bit of work to do. And so we wanted to provide a way to have an NPC companion who could grow with you but wouldn't require you to, thank you, Pelham. Pelham just brought me water. Wouldn't require you to constantly recalculate the companion CR. We also wanted to provide a way to create more fully fleshed out NPCs, but NPCs that use simpler classes than the classes in the player's handbook. And we wanted to have at least some of these growth options work not just for humanoid companions, but for monstrous companions and particularly animal companions that you might have. So that is a lot of sort of different design goals for this. In many ways, this should have simply been called like NPC classes because Sidekick, I think immediately, and I'm saying this because we've already gotten in the survey data from this article, I think led people to think this character, this non-player character, must by definition be secondary in power to the main character, which is not necessarily the case. The key is just simply you have a simple way to level up an NPC who joins your party or is already a member of your party and you now want them to get better. Also, because D&D is a co-op game, we often are fine if your companions, whether they're player characters or non-player characters, are highly effective. Because if your group is effective, you're all effective, if that makes sense.
Yes.
There is sometimes this funny, almost PvP mindset that will crop up in playtest feedback we get, where people will get upset about other people in their group being good, which is, again, in a team game like D&D is a rather odd response because in D&D you want everyone to be good. So really, our concern is not so-and-so, whether they're an NPC or a PC is great. The point simply for us is, does everyone have a chance to shine? Now, I should also say about these Sidekick rules, if they go any further in one of our books, they are fully under the purview of the Dungeon Master. And so some of the feedback we've gotten has been, oh my goodness, if our group has a whole zoo of creatures or a whole village of NPCs with us, that will get overwhelming. Well, DMs, if that's going to be overwhelming, please do not do it. That it is fully up to a DM, as with any optional rule, how to implement this, if at all, in a game. And the other thing to keep in mind is you can already do this using the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is simply a more straightforward way of doing it. You don't have to recalculate CRs. You don't have to delve into all the decision points of a full-fledged class. And that gets a bit into sort of the class design philosophy of these NPC classes. The goal was have as few choice points as possible. So you'll notice that other than like what weapon or armor the warrior might be using and which ability scores you might increase, there really are no choices in the warrior. The expert, similarly, is very straightforward with very few choices. The spellcaster gets a bit more complex because of spell choice.
Sure.
It was because of that we made it so that the number of spells that the spellcaster knows is, when it comes to our sort of spectrum of number of spells known, is on the lower end of the spectrum. It is on the sorcerer end of the spectrum rather than way up where a class like the wizard can potentially be with their spell book and whatnot. So you're probably all curious, those of you who have read the article, how the feedback went. Overall, positive. We went through the feedback over the last couple of days, and the impression of the warrior and the expert in particular is positive. Pardon me. The spellcaster had some less satisfaction, which we came to expect, because as soon as we released it, we saw the feedback and actually agreed with the feedback that giving this NPC class 9th level spells was potentially dicey. And
yeah, I could see that coming into creating some complications later on in the campaign.
Now, our concern is not actually, oh no, this NPC is going to outshine the PCs. That's not actually our concern, because again, we trust that if a group is going to use an optional rule like this, they're going to use it in the way that makes sense for their group.
Sure.
Which is to say, they want an NPC to fill in a spot in their group. You know, maybe you only have 1 or 2 players and you'd like an NPC to fill a spot, but again, you don't want the full complexity of one of the classes in the player's handbook. No, our concern is by allowing spells all the way up to 9th level, we're allowing a level of complexity that gives us concern. Because so often, as I've brought up before on Dragon Plus, as well as at conventions and elsewhere when I talk about our design philosophy, we're often concerned about how much complexity we unleash at your tables. Because on one hand, we want to give you interesting options, but on the other, we don't want to give you so much interesting that you actually stop having fun. We always need to balance the amount of interest we're giving you with how much can you actually juggle at the table in a way that's not going to get in the way of your storytelling, of the jokes you're telling, and other goals you might have for your D&D table.
You mentioned Sorcerer and Wizard. V2 Blast asks, is it possible to make a sidekick that might have Warlock spells, but with a regular caster spell slot progression?
Yes, in fact, the spellcaster NPC, when you make it, one of the choices you do make is which spell list that spellcaster NPC uses. And so you decide whether they use the Bard spell list, the Cleric spell list, the Druid spell list, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell list. So any of those spell lists is an option. And they use whatever spell list you pick. The class still uses a very straightforward spell slot system.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was misreading that a bit. They were asking about the Warlock spells, but using the regular caster spell slot progression. Was this intentional? And it sounds like
absolutely, it's intentional. There is actually nothing inherent to how we design Warlock spells that is any different from how we design spells for any other class. It is really kind of a design conceit specific to the Warlock that they get their slots back at times when other people don't. Again, there is nothing about Warlock spells themselves and how they're designed that makes them incompatible with how all other spellcasters work in the game. And frankly, the way the Warlock works, it works for the Warlock because we sort of fill in the gaps of the Warlock's capabilities with things like Eldritch Invocations and other class features. But if you take those features away, the way Pact Magic works in the Warlock, it does not play nice with the rest of the system by itself. It basically needs everything else we put in the Warlock to make sure that the Warlock has a kind of a steady supply of things to do in a typical D&D session. And so we made the choice that because we want this NPC spellcaster to be very simple, very straightforward, to just use the basic spellcasting mechanics that virtually every spellcaster in D&D uses, except for the player character Warlock. And even the player character Warlock, the basic mechanics are even still the same. It's still, you have a spell slot, you burn the spell slot to cast a spell of a particular level.
It's my favorite class to play.
Is the Warlock?
Is the Warlock, and it's partially the mechanics, but partially just the story of the packs, and I love going into that.
Yeah, we find consistently the Warlock is one of the most loved classes, and again, it's mostly because of the flavor. People love that idea of having a patron, having a patron whose mood affects the mood of the Warlock.
This is a bit off of...
Sorry about the coughing.
a bit off the sidekicks, but looking at Unearthed Arcana, and here we've got sidekicks that go up to level 20. Any likelihood of a future Unearthed Arcana exploring post-level 20 play?
I brought up before that we provide some post-level 20 options in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They're called Epic Boons, and it's a way for your character to gain new capabilities without gaining new levels. At this point, we simply don't see enough play occurring at those high levels to justify making even more levels beyond them. And by the way, this is not something specific to 5th edition. This has actually been true for the life of Dungeons & Dragons, that most D&D play, edition after edition after edition, for over 40 years of the game's history, has taken place between levels 1 and 10. Levels past 10, people absolutely play those levels. Don't mishear me on this. Many groups play past level 10 and even make it all the way to level 20. But when you compare the number of those groups to the number of groups playing at those lower levels, it often makes way more sense for a group if they've hit 20 and they've exhausted their story, and in the case of 5th edition, they've exhausted the epic boons available to them, it may be time to retire and start a new campaign.
That was my one 4th edition campaign that lasted that long to get to the epic destiny, and it was like, okay, this feels like a good time to reset.
Yeah. Now in 4th edition, 20 levels were stretched out over 30 levels. It was kind of an illusion that there were 10 extra levels. It was actually, it was still like the same amount of content, but stretched over 10.
It was our speakers go to an 11 situation.
Yes,
It's just a little,
it's exactly.
And the likelihood of this content appearing in D&D Beyond?
So it's not going to appear in D&D Beyond immediately.
Okay.
I've talked with them over there. They want to see how it develops before committing the resources to putting it into D&D Beyond. I mean, these NPC classes are structured like a regular class, so if they do decide to do it, I don't imagine it would be too complicated.
Okay.
But I would hate for them to do a bunch of work on something that I then radically redesign. And I've been tempted, even as I was doing the final design on this, was tempted to go in several different directions. You know, right now, the NPCs, pardon me, have 20 levels. There are a variety of ways this could be structured, where they only, increase in power every few levels relative to the player characters. One of the reasons I went with this is it's easy to understand because it just maps directly to how a player character works. Ease of use and ease of understandability is also why you'll see some familiar class features in these classes. There are some class features in these classes that come from player character classes. That's by design, so that you can focus on what's new here and get playing. These, again, are meant to be easy to use, straightforward, and quite honestly, you could even use them for a player character. The warrior and the spellcaster in particular have an effectiveness not too far behind a player character class, and you could hold your own if you decided you wanted to play a really basic spellcaster or a really basic warrior. You could hold your own playing one of these as a player character. The expert, less so, although I bet people would have a lot of fun playing one. And honestly, if you use one of these sidekicks in your group and you as the player control your sidekick, you will get to experience playing this character. And that was another part of our design approach to these sidekicks. We wanted them to be enjoyable for the person who's playing them and enjoyable to level them up. Which is why we went in the direction of giving them something at every level. One of the questions I've gotten since this article came out is, should the NPCs get fewer things when they level up than player characters do? We certainly considered that. But anytime we've designed classes for D&D and haven't given someone something every level, we get a lot of criticism.
It's the dead levels.
Exactly.
Nobody likes the dead levels.
But, and I wasn't surprised by this, in the feedback we got over the last few days on this article, there were people who said, give us dead levels. So we'll see. As we tinker with these and decide where to go next, we might consider making some dead levels if we even just stick with a 20 level approach. Although again, overall, feedback positive. The main feedback we got was to limit more which spell levels, especially when it comes to high level spell levels, the spellcaster has access to. And that was already something we were thinking, this is probably going too far. But as I've mentioned before in conversation with you, Bart, on this show, when we send something out in Unearthed Arcana, and really anything for playtesting, our philosophy is always, it's better for something to be overpowered and for us to rein it in than for us to send something out that is sort of woefully underpowered and then afterward have to do a bunch of new design to get it up. Basically, it's a more efficient design process for us to give too much and then cut than to send out too little and then have to build later and then really go through a whole nother round of playtesting, which we have done sometimes, but we always get better feedback when we basically say, all right, if this person went to the ability buffet and we gave them everything, what do you think? What should we remove from the plate?
Well, I've got a long-standing campaign that is myself as a dungeon master and 2 players, and we like it that way. But it seems like it's a useful mechanism to have a more rounded party as needed, and to work it that way. So I'm personally excited to try it out.
One thing, by the way, that an idea I've been toying with, particularly when it comes to the spellcaster, is to split it potentially into 2 classes and call one of them something like the healer and the other one something like the mage. And for each one actually create just a new simple spell list that doesn't rely on the spell lists of the player character classes. That would also help us narrow choice for those 2 spellcasting classes so that you're not having to consider the entire spell list of one of our player character classes.
So question, Jano Mytho asks, are there any internal creature creation mechanics that are being revealed in the design of these NPC subclasses? That is, does Wizards often design many NPC creatures in this way? Sort of these abilities, I believe the question is, are these abilities sort of revelatory towards creature design, forthcoming, or just process-wise?
No, not really. When we design a monster stat block, we are doing pretty ad hoc design where we decide what makes the most sense for that particular monster or NPC. We don't follow a kind of class progression like you see here. Now, we do give some of our NPCs and monsters abilities that are reminiscent of some of these abilities, but that's been true for all of 5th edition. There are certain abilities that show up over and over, things like sneak attack, different resistances, sometimes having advantage on this or that saving throw, or having advantage on your initiative checks. These are all mechanical themes that recur in 5th edition, and that you'll continue to see pop up here and there as the game continues to mature.
I'm rather fond of Jack of many trades. It's not Jack of all trades, but they're a Jack of many trades.
So it's funny. I renamed this feature because it has a subtle difference with Jack of all trades in the Bard.
Yeah.
Because Jack of all trades works with any ability check whatsoever. And I wanted this to specifically just work with checks that involve skills.
Yeah.
Which, quite frankly, is what I would do if I were designing Jack of all trades today. So this is almost, in a few places, you're seeing actually, if I were leading the design of the player's handbook today,
yes,
how some of the player character features would now look. So
well,
Jack of many trades kind of addresses a little bit of a loophole that is in Jack of all trades unintentionally.
It's got a nice callback, though. The name fits it nicely,
Yes.
I think.
Yep.
Let's see. So I'm sorting through some of these questions now. I'm looking specifically for if there's any related to sidekicks and unearthed arcana before we perhaps move on to some general questions outside of unearthed arcana and sidekicks. But we certainly have many of those as well. So yes, please keep the questions coming.
Yeah, while you're looking at questions, Bart, I'll say some more about just sort of general design with the sidekicks. It was very much intentional, as I said at the beginning of the show, that the warrior NPC class in particular be usable even with things like animal companions. Because people often like to have animals in their group and have often asked for a simple way to level them up. Again, you could already do this with the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it's not super straightforward because of, again, the challenge rating calculation factor. So I wanted to make sure that someone could take the warrior class, for instance, and apply it to a wolf or a hound or whatever the creature is that you have in your group that you've gotten attached to. Because in many groups, their non-humanoid companions are viewed as much of a part of the party as any of the humanoids. And I wanted to make it simple for people to realize that fantasy. I've also gotten questions and comments pertaining to things like the Beastmaster Ranger and whether the sidekicks are meant in some ways to replace the Beastmaster, that sort of thing. Or, even some concern, do the sidekicks make the Beastmaster irrelevant? So, the question is no, the sidekicks do not make the Beastmaster irrelevant. And the sidekicks are also not meant to address anything in particular inside the Beastmaster. The Beastmaster is a very kind of unusual subclass in the game in that it has that companion built in as a class feature. Unlike other subclasses in the game, the Beastmaster's class features basically incarnate as a being next to them. Most classes, their class features are more abstract. You get some more spells, you get this or that advantage. Whereas the Beastmaster has basically accepted their class features show up next to them and have hit points. And of course, other classes can summon creatures, other classes can befriend creatures, druids can awaken them.
That was that's a question that has come in at the moment. Projectralis asks, if a sidekick is a beast and its mind becomes awakened, can it multi-class sidekick classes?
Well, right now there are no multi-class sidekick rules. But
talking about keeping it straightforward, this
exactly.
Immediately
branches. There are intentionally no multi-class rules here. Now, if we provided the multi-class rules and a beast became awakened, then it is potential the beast would qualify for an option that requires speech or greater intelligence. but what I wanted to say, going back to the Beastmaster, is that let's say your group decides to use this optional rule, and you have a Beastmaster's Companion in the group. That beast could qualify for gaining levels in the warrior class, for example. So rather than this in any way replacing the Beastmaster, it could be used as an enhancement of the Beastmaster. Also, for the people in the back, and I'm saying this, I'm repeating this because of the number of comments I got about this. The Beastmaster is not in the game as the way you get a companion. There's a lot of misperceptions about the Beastmaster that somehow, if you want a companion, you must take the Beastmaster subclass, and that if anyone else gets a companion, they're somehow stealing the Beastmaster's thunder.
Sure. Yeah.
The Beastmaster is not the class if you simply want to have a companion. Anyone can have a companion. That has been true since the game was released. And again, the Dungeon Master's Guide has rules for that. The Beastmaster is specifically if you want to play this unusual character who has this mystical bond with this one animal, and mechanically this animal who actually represents some of your character's effectiveness. Then in a way, you've signed up to have your effectiveness spread over two beings. It's a very unusual concept. I'm so sorry, I keep coughing.
That's all right. We will get through this.
Yes, we will get through it. Everyone
You're
is
doing the
like,
lion's share of
God.
the talking under the hot lights.
Yes.
No, but Obo Crazy has said we will get you some honey tea immediately.
Thank you.
This
Thank
show.
you.
So it's not about having a companion; it's about having that companion. As
Yes,
a Beastmaster.
exactly. That the Beastmaster Companion is this very special, mystical companion, the thunder of which is not stolen by other companions in the game.
I kind of like this question, although I'm pretty sure that the answer is no. But Ravenna asks, can a Beastmaster summon a ghost monk sidekick?
What?
I don't know, but I like I like the idea of a ghost monk sidekick. And can it use the time stop spell? I think there's a particular character concept in mind that this question asker might have.
Yeah,
so as I go for it and see what your Dungeon Master has to say. Another question, why no recalculation of challenge rating for sidekicks? Don't they increase a monster's power?
They do, but recalculating challenge rating is unnecessary because we've done that work for you in this class progression. That as soon as you start taking levels in these classes, pardon me, you can now use the proficiency bonus as shown in these classes. So again, no challenge rating calculation necessary. Because the only reason if you're playing an NPC as a member of your group that you would need to calculate challenge rating is to figure out that character's proficiency bonus. We've done that work for you in these sidekick rules.
Just a quick shout out to Eric Green for making the Kodo and Podo joke before I could. Which I'm sure comes up every time we mention the Beastmaster. Well, we're getting close here to about, we're 3/4 past the hour. before we head up to, across the way to D&D News. Was there anything more about the Sidekick's design that you wanted to cover, or I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time to cover some of the general questions beyond?
That was most of it. I just wanted to thank everyone, as always, for your feedback. I love reading it. It helps us make D&D a better game. So please keep answering our survey questions. And if we have any Sidekick questions here, we can answer them, or we can move on to general D&D questions.
We do have quite a few general companion. Well, here's one more. How would you handle a player that wants a non-beast companion akin to the Beastmaster's bond? So I suppose...
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you ask that again?
How would you handle a player that wants a non-beast companion, but akin to with the Beastmaster's bond? So that Beastmaster's bond with the beast, player who would like that with a different non-beast.
You could take a low CR creature that meets the CR requirements of the beast in the Beastmaster Ranger and play around with that and see how it works. Because as long as you're meeting the CR requirement in the Beastmaster, you could use most of the Beastmaster's rules. Now that said, the Beastmaster's rules do assume you are with something of beast level intelligence. It would be a little odd to use the Beastmaster's rules with somebody who's just as smart as the Ranger.
Right. Again, both friends think that they're the sidekick. The other one is the sidekick.
Yeah. Although I know many people love their animal companions so much, they really do think of like their bear as the character and the ranger as the sidekick, and that's fine.
It's a mean trick as a dungeon master. But if there's ever motivation needed in one of my games, if you mess with the player's animal companions or a beloved magic item, it is phenomenally more effective than messing with the player themselves and their character. Alpha Stream asks, I really like the Unearthed Arcana sidekicks, but I feel like often as dungeon masters, we don't know what NPC will come along with the party. Rules for converting a creature NPC of any challenge rating to a sidekick.
So right now, if you want to take somebody who, let's say the player characters meet a high CR character and they decide to come along, most of the time you can just use that high CR character as written. As soon as, especially, you're getting up near CR10, I wouldn't bother adding anything to that creature because they're going to be pretty effective for a long time. It's really at those lower CRs where it can be dangerous to take an NPC or a critter along with you, because often you have that terrible situation of, oh God, we took Lassie into the dungeon and Lassie got killed.
Bill the pony didn't even get that far.
And so if you have a higher CR person, I would say often don't give yourself a headache of even modifying them. If you do want to modify them, then I recommend using the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, that said, we could, if we decide to go further with the Sidekick rules, we could certainly look at providing more guidance, more as in any guidance at all, in using the Sidekick classes with a higher CR creature. It's certainly doable. Most likely it would involve the higher CR creature essentially starting in the NPC class at a higher level. And so until we provide you official rules, what you could do if you wanted to put one of these NPC classes on top of a high CR creature is have the creature join the class at a level that has the proficiency bonus the creature already has. That way you avoid any of the headaches of conflicting proficiency bonuses. And essentially, so if you have a creature with a proficiency bonus of, say, +4, you might have it come into the warrior class at level 9 and then proceed from there. And this, again, is so that you can avoid having the headaches of recalculating CRs. You avoid the headaches of crashing proficiency bonuses, that kind of thing.
Kiosis asks, would you use the Sidekick rules for the knight background?
Would I use it for the knight background? These could certainly work for any of the NPC companions that our backgrounds refer to. Not only in the knight background, but also the guilds in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Often if you have high enough renown with them, you get various NPC companions. You might decide you like one or two of those companions a lot and want to level them up.
So I'm gonna throw out, as Jeremy slowly chokes to death
Yes,
next
that's
to
right.
me, I'll throw out some of the other questions that have come in. If one of them strikes you, let me know. Question about the Ranger Natural Explorer options coming out. Questions about if there's a particular challenge in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, most challenging design element. Question about if you, Mike, and Chris Perkins were the three original starter Pokemon, which Pokemon do you think you'd each be? Which just delights me.
If I were ever to be a Pokemon, I think I want to be Bulbasaur.
And why? Why that one?
Because I like turtles. I say as the man who made it, pushed forward turtles in D&D.
The turtle package, yes, that was quite the poll that took place last year. But it all went 2 years. Boy, that was 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But it all went to a great cause. It ended up creating the turtle package and the turtle playable race, and all of the proceeds for turtles went to Extra Life in 2017. So.
Now, because I like turtles, I also like Squirtle. And I have it home somewhere, a children's book that came out years ago called Come Out Squirtle.
Would we ever get, can we get stats for animal races? I'm assuming not just the animals, but animal races like wolf and monkey and snake, so we can run a campaign when we play as animal companions.
So you honestly could play animals now using these NPC classes, because since these NPC classes are built on stat blocks, as opposed to being built on player character races, you could take the wolf, for instance, from the monster manual, give it one of these classes, and play that as your character if you wanted to. That's why I tweeted out after the day I think that we posted the Sidekick article that I realized as I was finishing it up, it's like basically we just designed a way to play almost anything in the game as a player character. So I would love it, please. Somebody do a Watership Down style campaign where you're playing hounds and bunnies and birds and whatnot, and I want to see that live stream.
I've seen that show hit Netflix. I have not had the courage to dive into Watership Down at the moment.
That is a hard one.
Yes, that's my trepidation. We had a question here: the benefit of including monster features in the stat block versus reference spells. We've got a question here about functionality of the blur spell with combat maneuvers.
Wait, what was the one about spells?
Oh, let's see. I will call it up. And I lost it immediately. Oh, sorry, here it is. From Lazorn asks, what's the major benefit to having a monster ability that's presented in the monster stat block versus reference spells? I suppose how...
Oh, right. Because some monsters, specifically spellcasting monsters, there'll be a reference to a spell, but then monsters will also have particular abilities they can use, sometimes which kind of look like spells. So it's the way we approach it is if a monster is a spellcaster, then we obviously are going to refer to the spells that exist in the game. But then we give them specific abilities that might also be magical if we want to make sure those abilities are inherent to the creature. Because we point out in the introduction to the monster manual that a DM might swap the spells out in a spellcasting monster spell list, but if there's an ability we want the monster to always have, no matter which spells are on the list, we build that into the monster and don't rely on it always sitting there in the spell list. Especially, again, if you have the spell casting trait as opposed to the innate spell casting trait.
Alrighty. Well, we're getting close to 3 o'clock, so just to be cognizant of the time, I will start wrapping things up here. First by thanking Jeremy through sitting through a rigorous, probably more rigorous Dragon Plus live stream.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for your patience with me as I've been coughing.
It happens to all of us. Thanks to everyone again for tuning in for the past hour, for spending part of your day with us. Thank you to our followers, subscribers. As always, thank you to our moderators as well. We'll be coming back at 3 p.m. with Greg Tito, D&D News, and at 4 p.m. Dice Camera Action with your Dungeon Master, Chris Perkins. Again, we will be back next week, but we are shifting a few things around in the schedule. So do take a look at the Twitch channel page, and we'll be keeping folks updated on the most recent schedule as things come in. So as always, thank you for your questions. We will be collecting them after the show and writing them up for future reference. I will be making my purchase of my bingo wheel so that we can cut them up and we'll start pulling.
That actually sounds fun.
Yes, I agree. Now it's a joke, but now it's going to happen. All right. Again, happy 2019 to everyone. Good gaming, and thank you for watching again. And thank you, Jeremy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Bart.